So today I was going around, looking around, and um, something drew my attention in Job. Um, and uh, my Bible, has like little, kind of like little titles there in the bold on what the kind of section it could be about, what the section is about. Well, this one says Job asks how he has sinned. So it caught my eye, and so I wanted to share verses 20 through 23 of that little section there this morning. And it says, "O God, grant me these two things, and then I will be able to face you. Remove your heavy hand from me, and don't terrify me with your awesome presence. Now summon me, and I will answer. Or let me speak to you, and you reply. Tell me, what have I done wrong? Show me my rebellion and my sin." So, um, kind of backstory. Job is being allowed to be inflicted, um, and all these bad things happen to him. Um, Originally, it was because Satan, you know, talked to God, and Satan was talking about how there's no good in the world or anything like that, and God was like, "Well, have you considered my servant Job?" And so Satan was like, "Well, he's only worshiping you and following you because you take such good care of him. You don't let anything bad happen to him or nothing like that." It says, you know, and so God had no doubt, and no doubt whatsoever Job's dedication to him, and but Satan was so sure that he could get Job to turn away from God and denounce God that um, God allowed him to do all these horrible things to him. The only thing that God did not permit Satan to do was to, actually mortally wound or kill Job. That was the only thing he wasn't allowed to do. Um, so Job is going through all these troubles, um, and oddly enough, the first person who wanted to lash out and rebel against God was Job's wife. And Job was like, no, you know, basically told her that, you can't expect blessings from God without having troubles from God at the same time. Um, so Job thereby did not sin against God. Then three of Job's friends come in to try to console him and try to support him. And that turns out to be a big mess because basically they're all just telling him, well, you wouldn't be going through through all these troubles if you hadn't have done something wrong. So Job finally starts to plead his case with God. And then, you know, he's at a loss. He doesn't know why everything is going so far south on him. He doesn't know what he has done. um, and it gets to a point where Job even starts wishing that he was never born. The whole gambit that we go through, because Job is human just like we are. Um, but one thing that Job does that a lot of times we don't do or we don't refuse to do is he decides to ask God, show me what I've done wrong. You know, what did I do you know, to anger you basically so much? And, you know, it's very important to read this because it shows what kind of relationship that Job head with God. Job wasn't afraid to ask God to show him what he had done wrong. He didn't understand what was going on to him. He didn't know why. So he was basically asking God to show him, where did he rebel against God? What did I do wrong? What sin did I commit that's causing all this? And of course, in the end of it all, it turns out, you know, Job's uh, piety, um, his attitude of how religious he um, was slowly coming out. Um, and then he got to a point to where he started not asking God, but questioning God, and to the point to where I guess his pride was starting to show. And then that's when God stepped in and started asking Job a bunch of questions that revealed to Job finally that Job didn't have all the answers, that Job was God's creation, and that basically that he didn't have the right to demand God what he has done. I mean, there's no problem and there's no sin in asking God to show you what you have done wrong. But Job took it a step further. Um, to the point where his he at the end of all he realized what he was doing and confessed his sin to God, and um, and then God not only restored to Job what he had, but even multiplied it. Um, so in the beginning, you know, Job's troubles started because God did allow Satan to do these things to him, so that um, Satan could see, one, that he's never going to defeat God, because that's kind of like what Satan was trying to do. He was trying to tell God, you know, you're giving him all this protection. You got a hedge around him. Nothing harms him. Nothing hurts him. You're giving him, all this wealth, all this fame, blah blah blah. Says he'll never leave you because you're treating him so well. You know, but Job was real good and real strong at first. As the troubles went on, and then especially after the three friends were hounding him and started accusing him of obviously doing evil things or whatever. Um, Job's questioning, um, well, Job kept pleading his case that he didn't do anything wrong to God. He was insistent on it, uh, and then then he did what we need to do. Ask what show me what I have done. What did I do to warrant all this upon me? Um, but unfortunately, after he asked God to show him, then he started to turn toward anger and start saying things. Woe is me! I wish I'd never been born. Um, you know, and then he actually started questioning God. At some point too, to the point to where God was like, "Okay, enough's enough. Were you there when I created all these things? Do you control, like the stars and the heavens?" And just God just instead of telling him where he went wrong, in God's mercy, he just kept asking question upon question upon question, to where Job himself realizes what he had done, that he had done wrong, so that he could confess. Um, and sometimes God's going to give you a straight answer, and sometimes God's going to do to you like Job. He might just keep asking you question and question and question until eventually, we'll catch on to what we did wrong, and then once we realize that and we're true to God, it'll convict us, and we'll be able to ask for forgiveness, and we can turn away from the mistake that we had done in the past. And I think that's the important thing with Job here, is that he shows us that you don't have to be afraid to ask God why. You know, what's my sin? What did I do? Because let's face it, we're human beings. We're not perfect. We're always sinning, and sometimes we may have done something that's a sin, and sometimes we just don't realize it. Whether it be through ignorance or maybe some sort of ripple effect that causes somebody else to go down a wayward way, through our actions, or through what we have done or said in the public, that puts a bad light on our faith. And so don't be afraid to ask God if things are going bad, and you don't understand why. You know, it's not a sin to ask God to show you why what you have done. But when you start questioning God's wisdom, his authority, and his knowledge, that's when it starts becoming a sin. So, anyways, that's what I felt led to share today. I hope it reaches out to somebody. I hope it touches somebody. I love you guys. You have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.